The pen in my hand felt heavier than it should have. 3 a.m. Windowless conference room, the kind with carpet that eats sound and a thermostat nobody trusts. The glass of water sweated a slow ring onto legal paper like the minute hand of a small, damp clock. Across from me, Marcus rubbed his temple with 2 fingers the way he does when he's out of words. The loan agreement was a cliff, the signature line, a thin plank over dark water. My phone buzzed face down. Unknown caller. And for a heartbeat, I imagined the voice on the other end saying, "Walk away." I clicked the screen dark with my thumb. Somewhere outside, the cleaning crew rolled their blue bin and a bottle clinked against plastic. "Evan," Marcus said, voice worn smooth. "We either sign, or we call people at sunrise who don't deserve what's coming." I glanced at the ceiling tiles. They've heard confessions before. I signed my name. The pen didn't get any lighter. I grew up in a place where winters smelled like rubber and gasoline when the plows idled at dawn. Fremont, Ohio, a few miles off the highway and a lifetime from anywhere that makes the news for the right reasons. Dad ran a forklift at the distribution center until his back said no. Mom picked up weekend shifts at the hospital, coming home with the paper stickers from 4 bags still stuck to her shoes like pale confetti. Our house was a ranch with aluminum siding, a backyard that sloped just enough to make every soccer ball roll to the same patch of brown. In the garage, we had an old IBM tower Dad got from an auction at work. Beige case, a fan that whined like a distant mosquito. I can still smell the dust when I removed the panel the first time, touching chips as if they were sleeping animals. When the phone rang and the internet screamed to life, Mom would shout from the kitchen, "5 minutes, Evan. I need to call your aunt." 5 minutes stretch the way they do when you're learning the shape of a thing you love and you don't have language for it yet. I'd print out lines of C code on the dot matrix printer, green and white paper, serrated edges you tear off in a satisfaction that feels like progress. In high school, I charged $5 to fix printers with mystery paper jams, which were usually just paper shoved in angry, and I rebuilt iPods in our basement with parts that came in yellow envelopes. I liked how small things could go wrong in a way you could hold in your hand. I liked screws in tidy dishes and the sharp smell of isopropyl that meant I was doing something. One winter afternoon, Dad came down the steps, rubbing his knuckles like he was warming them for a fight. "You really make money on those?" he asked. "Enough to buy pizza," I said. "And the parts? Cheaper if you know the right for 'em." He nodded as if I'd told him the weather. He wasn't impressed by small numbers, but he respected neat work. He'd grown up measuring boards twice because you could only afford to cut once. I went to Ohio State because a scholarship plus in-state meant I could breathe. The campus in August had that electric hum of a city performing optimism. New shirts, lanyards like pilgrim badges, pizza grease on paper plates that curled at the edges. My roommate, Derek, snored with a surprising soloist confidence. I wrote a tiny app that played a chime when a washing machine was about to free up in our building and stuck a QR code by the laundry room door. Around midnight, I'd watch the dashboard count down a dozen dorms to 0 like the campus was swallowing laundry in waves. One afternoon, a woman with a caramel voice and a physics textbook balanced like a shield leaned against our doorway and said, "You the guy who made the washer thing?" "Depends," I said. "Am I in trouble?" She smiled without showing teeth. "It saved me 30 minutes. I'm Hannah." We had coffee at the student union that tasted like wet cardboard and shared a table with a man who lectured us about the decline of penmanship. Hannah's hair smelled like grapefruit and lab work. We talked about nothing the way people do when they are auditioning the idea of a future, throwing lines to see which ones hold. In my junior year, I interned at a logistics startup in a strip mall behind a Wendy's. The sign out front had 3 letters burned out, and the doorbell never worked. But the founder, Tom Reyes, a man who chewed gum like it owed him money, taught me 6 things I didn't know I'd need. First, never demo on a Friday. Second, if a prospect says interesting, they mean no, unless they ask for an invoice. Third, a broken coffee machine will tell you more about the culture than a values poster. Fourth, if the heat goes out and people keep working, invest. Fifth, interchange on credit cards, roughly 2%. Changes how people behave without knowing they're paying for it. Sixth, spell your variable names out like you'll be defending them in court. The summer I left, Tom sold the company for an amount that made him look smaller somehow. He hugged me in the parking lot, then stepped back as if the hug had been an accident. Go build something, he said, his breath minty and tyrannical. Fail fast is cute. Learn fast pays the rent. I built a car-sharing app called Stitch. The logo looked like a sewing mistake. We launched with 3 cars, my Civic, Derek's Corolla, and a dented Jeep belonging to a woman named Cassidy who cussed like a sailor and negotiated like one too. Insurance killed us by Thanksgiving. I sent a refund to a man in Dayton and he mailed me a photograph of a parking ticket, as if paper could haunt me. At a bar with the kind of ceiling fan that looks decorative, I told Hannah we were shutting it down. You going to be okay? She asked. I'm 22. I said. The world is a buffet. She laughed, but her eyes measured me. After that semester, she moved to North Carolina for grad school. We tried 3 months of heroic calls, and then slowly watched the future we'd mapped evaporate like a puddle in good weather. We were good, she said, last call in more ways than one. We were, I said. In the mirror behind the bar, I looked like someone waiting for instructions. I jumped to payments because money, like electricity, is all around and you only think about it when it stops working. I wanted the unglamorous middle, the place where you can fix a leak and save someone more than they'll ever see. I called it Clear Harbor because I liked the sound of arriving. The pitch was simple. If you're a small manufacturer waiting net 60 to get paid for bolts that hold together the country, we'll pay you on day 2 and take a tiny slice when your customer pays on time. Factoid. The ACH network that moves money quietly in America dates back to the 1970s, and it still hums like a patient, tireless conveyor belt. I liked the rhythm of it. Pull, settle, reconcile, little river, big river, ocean. We were a team of 4 in an office that smelled like dry erase and carpet cleaner. The AC rattled like a nervous guest. My first customer was a shop in Toledo that stamped metal parts for washing machines. The owner, a man with hands like cracked leather, wore safety glasses on his forehead like a second pair of eyes. My father paid cash, he said. I pay with patience. When our first payment hit his account on a Tuesday, $80,000 he hadn't expected until Halloween, he texted me a photo of his foreman grinning with a pallet of steel. The photo was blurry. The grin wasn't. I met Lauren at a mixer for founders where the beer came in elegant bottles and the music was low because someone had read a study about decibel levels and deal-making. She was a journalist who kept her pen behind her ear as if it might fly away. We dated in the margins for a handful of months. Weekday dinners at places that smell like rosemary and petty empire. Early mornings when she'd take my picture in the kitchen with her phone, the light falling like a clean sheet over everything. Write about me after I'm interesting. I joked once. You're interesting when you forget to perform, she said. We didn't break up so much as we failed to reschedule a series of cancellations. She wrote a long piece later about small cities becoming startup towns, how coffee shops turned into co-working spaces, and the price of optimism could be measured in latte foam. She sent me the link without words. I clicked and winced and smiled for reasons that contradict each other. We raised a seed round from a firm with a conference room named after constellations like money was a telescope. The partner, Nora Fields, had a handshake designed to end arguments. Middle mile fintech, she said, tapping our deck with a pen. Not sexy. I like it. She asked me what I was afraid of, and I told her, truthfully, fraud you only see when it's already in your rearview mirror. Factoid. The fraud triangle, pressure, opportunity, rationalization, sounds like something from a business school exam, but it lives in payroll departments and quiet corners of spreadsheets where rounding hides like a mouse. We built models that guessed when a receivable was a promise and when it was a poem. We bought data nobody else wanted and wrote rules that talked to each other at 2 in the morning while we slept, making tiny judgments. When it worked, it felt like we'd convinced time to bend a little. Our first real scare came when Marcus called me at 6:12 a.m. Early winter, the sky like a bruise without edges. We've got noise in the pipeline, he said, which was Marcus for possible catastrophe. A wholesaler in Florida had submitted invoices that smelled like cologne you buy in a gas station. On paper, it all worked. In the world, trucks had not moved and lights had not been turned on, and a man we eventually found in a rented house in Miami had built a castle out of PO numbers and air. We cut them off fast and ate a loss that made my stomach cramp for 2 days. The lesson smelled like burnt toast. We tightened our rules, added 2 steps we'd hoped we could avoid, and told our sales team to slow down. Words they accepted the way cats accept baths. I walked the office that night, lights off, the hum of servers the only sound. I talked to the desks under my breath as if they were people who needed reassurance. "We'll be okay," I said. I meant me. Austin seduced us with breakfast tacos and the promise that cedar trees only mess with you in March. We signed a lease in a building where the elevator paused between floors like it needed to think. The mornings were blue as enamel. Diego, who ran customer success like a neighbor who remembers to shovel your sidewalk, taught me how this city says hello. "You don't pitch," he said. "You say what you're building like it's a salad recipe." Our first week, a woman named Amara, an ops lead from a local parts distributor, walked in with a ponytail and a file folder thick as a Sunday paper. "We keep getting paid," she said, "but the timing is a blindfold. I need you to put windows in the walls." We built her a dashboard that spoke in calm colors and simple promises. She brought empanadas to the office the day we cut her average wait time in half. It felt like a small parade. When the pandemic came, time got jammed in the door. The office shut. We took our chairs home in quiet caravans. Video calls made my face look like someone I didn't recognize. Clients called from spare bedrooms, dogs thunking tails against doors. Factoid: the price of shipping a container across the Pacific jumped from a couple $1,000s to more than 10 times that in the space of months, like gravity had been renegotiated. Our customers didn't need faster money so much as they needed predictable money, and predictability had gone on vacation. We built a tool in a weekend that let them simulate cash flow with a slider where the world usually sat. You could drag tomorrow to next Thursday and watch what broke. People cried on Zoom in gratitude, and because they were living through something both too large and too specific. We helped a manufacturer in Indiana keep 47 people employed through a spring that tasted like fear and hand sanitizer. When I hung up after that call, I put my head on the sun-warmed wood of my desk and stayed very still. Series C came with a valuation number that made my mother quiet on the phone for so long I thought the call had dropped. "That's a lot of zeros," she said finally. "They don't seem real." "They aren't," I said. "Not the way you mean." The day the wire hit, I drove to the strip mall where Dad used to pick up hardware and bought a toilet plunger I didn't need and a box of nails I'd never hammer, just to be surrounded by things with straightforward purposes. I put the nails on my desk like a paperweight that kept me from drifting. Factoid: for years, more than half of business-to-business payments in the U.S. were still made by paper check, envelopes moving through the postal system like stubborn time capsules. I kept one of the last checks we received in a drawer, not cashed, just a relic in an era that wanted to forget what friction felt like. It is hard to explain being called a billionaire like it's a trait you could inherit or a hobby you could pick up at night school. The number lived on paper and in headlines that made my mouth taste like a penny. Sometimes people regard you the way they regard a strange dog, maybe friendly, maybe not. I ate cereal one morning reading a profile where I sounded more decisive than anyone I recognized. Lauren texted me a screenshot of the part where I said culture eats strategy for breakfast. "You said the line," she wrote. "I know," I replied. "I regret it, and also I did mean it." We met for coffee, the kind with tasting notes like a wine movie, and talked about the weather like people who used to know each other's toothbrush schedules. When we stood to leave, she touched my sleeve with 2 fingers as if to test the fabric and said, "Don't forget to be a person on purpose." It landed like a small stone in my pocket. I still reach for it. We made mistakes with the speed and confidence of people who believed they'd survive them. I hired a VP of sales because his numbers were loud. He lasted 4 months and left a trail of burned introductions and a spreadsheet that looked like poetry if poetry owed you money. I apologized to the team by bringing in breakfast tacos, a gesture roughly like offering a Band-Aid after a chainsaw accident. I learned to say we when I wanted to say I, and to let I step forward when the blame had chair legs. When we crossed 300 employees, I found myself practicing my smile in the dark reflection of the office window at 9 p.m., the city lights turning my face into a collage. "How do we keep this tender?" I asked Nora at a board meeting where the air conditioning was enthusiastic. "We don't hire people who fall in love with their title," she said. "We hire people who fall in love with Tuesdays." Cassidy from the car-sharing days resurfaced with a scarf and a laugh that walked into a room first. "You owe me for that Jeep," she said when she visited the office. touching the edge of a desk as if gauging the weight of what I'd built. We had dinner where the waiter described the specials like bedtime stories. "You always wanted to be in the middle of the machine," she said. "Did you think the machine would watch you back?" "Sometimes I think the machine is me," I said. "Sometimes I think I'm still the kid in a basement with solvent in my lungs." She clinked her glass against mine. "Either way, clean your filters." The near-death that led to the 3 a.m. signature arrived in a package labeled operational. A bug in our reconciliation logic, subtle as dust, multiplied over 31 days and landed on the wrong side of a threshold that woke the wrong alarms. Money we thought had settled hadn't. Money we thought was pending was gone. We caught it before the house fell, but the roofline moved in the wind. We lined up a credit facility at rates that pinched, because crying about rates is like crying about gravity. Marcus built a war room schedule. I made a list of calls I owed people if we failed, names that looked different at night than during business hours. I set a reminder on my phone for each, and then I put the phone face down. When I signed that agreement, unknown caller rang. I let it go. Later, when I checked, it was my father calling from a number that always does that for reasons I don't understand. The voicemail is still in my phone, my father breathing for a second longer than you'd expect before he says, "Just calling to say I'm proud." Proud either way. Some evenings, after the office had turned into an afterimage, I'd take a walk and end up at the bridge that slices the river. There's a plaque about the history of the place, how the city grew around the water. I like the way the wind carries small truths there: cigarette smoke, cut grass, rain on hot pavement, like reminders that the world did not start when you noticed it. A kid once did a wheelie on a bike past me and shouted, "Do a trick." I lifted my coffee cup and bowed. He laughed with his whole face. I thought of how markets have their seasons just like trees, only the leaves are numbers, and if you pay attention you can hear them fall before you see it on a chart. We didn't go public. People assumed we would because money seems to require a narrative arc with fireworks. We chose a path that meant fewer magazine covers and more Tuesday mornings where the most urgent thing was a call with a supplier who'd learned to pronounce our name by the second syllable. We built an internal habit of writing memos that started with the problem and ended with the smallest first next step. We celebrated less, which made the celebrations we kept feel like they belonged to us. On our 5th anniversary, someone made a slideshow with photos from the early days: the carpet, the sad fern, the sign with our name printed on a piece of paper and taped inside the glass. I felt a tenderness that surprised me. Amara sent an email at midnight that said, "We shipped a pallet today we wouldn't have shipped without you in 2020. That person's mortgage payment still clears because 5 years ago you believed in numbers that aren't sexy." I reread it more times than necessary. There were women around the edges, which is where many of the important things live. Hannah married a pediatrician who looks like he could carry all your groceries in one trip. We exchange holiday cards with notes that say nothing and everything. The kids' names, the dog's latest crimes, a caption about a camping trip where the tent went on strike. Lauren won a journalism award and sent me a photo of the trophy in her kitchen lit by a bulb that needed replacing. "Still interesting?" she wrote. "Still trying to be human on purpose," I replied. I dated a designer named Maya one spring. Her studio smelled like sawdust and lemon oil, and she measured everything with her hands in the air before committing to a pencil. "You think in systems," she said, writing in a notebook with the kind of attention that should be banked. "I think in edges." We lasted until summer and ended with a hug that felt like a thank you note. When I moved, she sent a housewarming gift, a level, the tool that tells you what your eye might lie about. It has a little bubble that aligns when the world is where it should be. I keep it on my bookshelf between a dog-eared copy of a logistics handbook and a novel with an ending I admire. On a Tuesday, because Nora was right, I visited a community college and watched a kid in a welding helmet draw a line of light across steel. The sparks landed at his feet like new stars. I wrote a check to fund a lab there, the kind where you learn to make your hands do what good work requires. The dean shook my hand too many times. A student asked if I was famous, and I said, "Only on the internet," which is not the same. Driving back, I put the level in the cup holder passenger seat as if it were a companion who might tell me if I was leaning. The road hummed a note I recognized. By the time we crossed profitability that didn't wobble in a stiff breeze, the office plant had taken on the personality of a coworker who replies all. The security guard at the front desk taught me a new way to tie my tie that forgave my clumsy fingers. We learned to build on ramps instead of cliffs. We learned that market share looks better on a slide than in your stomach. We learned that sometimes the best feature is a guarantee in plain English, and the worst bug is the one that makes a person feel stupid. Once, a vendor tried to sell me AI with a pitch deck that glittered like a parade. Will this help a 37-person shop in Akron ship parts on Thursday? I asked. Eventually, he said. We don't sell eventually, I said. He blinked like I'd spoken a language he'd forgotten he knew. The night I slept at the office again, I woke at 2:30 to the hummingbird buzz of a server that needed attention and the refrigerator sighing like an old man. I walked to the window and looked out at the city making its little sleeping sounds. On my desk was a napkin with a note from Diego. We are okay, even when we are not okay. It looked like a joke and like scripture. I poured water from the chipped mug that had followed me from the strip mall days, the handle glued once, and said ask you. The water tasted faintly of dust and determination. On my phone was a photo from Marcus of a chart that sloped the right way and a text from Nora that said, "Don't call me back. Just keep going." I set the phone face down and listened to the quiet, the kind that isn't empty but full, like a theater right before the lights go down. Later, when people ask me what it feels like to be that person, I don't tell them about the number. I tell them about the smell of a warehouse in July, warm cardboard, diesel, coffee that sat too long. When a foreman tells you your invoice hit when he needed it, and his daughter's braces will be paid on Friday. I tell them about pens that feel heavy and signatures that feel like diving and unknown callers that turn out to be people you love saying they are proud either way. I tell them about nails on a desk and a level in a cup holder and the sound of a printer that might jam, but doesn't if you coax it right, and how that sound can sometimes be enough to get you to make the next good decision. Tonight, I'm home. The refrigerator hums its small northern song. The ice in the glass clicks like a polite guest. My phone is face down, but not because I'm avoiding anything, because it's good to let the room be the room. On the counter, a stack of handwritten notes waits for stamps. I try to write them when I can. To people we forget are people because they're on the other side of email. A customer service rep who caught a mistake before it became a story, the woman at the bank who explained a form without making me feel like a trespasser. In the other room, the air feels like laundry at the moment before it cools. The city outside is a low chorus. I open the window to let it in. I think about tomorrow the way you think about an old friend who surprises you by showing up on time. There's a meeting at 9, a warehouse at noon, a dinner I might leave early because the kitchen feels better. I'm not done. I don't think I want to be done. Somewhere down the hall, a light I forgot to turn off waits with quiet patience. The way work waits when it's not a burden, but a way of finding out who you are when nobody's watching. If there's a next chapter, maybe it's less about climbing and more about tending. I have a level to tell me if my eye lies, a handful of nails as ballast, a voice on a voicemail that breathes and then says what matters. The pen is lighter now. I'll keep it close.